even a reasonably bright man could go mad. You've heard the phrase cruel and unusual? A cell that is 7 by 12 feet, 23 hours a day in it, communication only through a cell slot in the door.
I leaned across the table, my face close to Lowe's. Blood was pounding inside my head. Tran Van Lowe was foot soldier. He had to be, and he had the answers that I wanted. Was he also responsible for all these murders? So why did you kill Sergeant Ellis Cooper? The others? Why did they have to die? Is it all just revenge? Tell me what the hell happened in the An Lao Valley. Tell me and I'll go away. He shook his head.
I've told you enough. Go home, detective. You don't need to hear any more. Yes, I am foot soldier. The other answers you seek are too much for the people in your country to hear. Let this murder case go. Just this once, detective. Let it go.
Chapter 107. I made no move to get up and leave. Tran Van Lowe stared at me impassively. Then he smiled. Had he expected this? Stubbornness? Obtuseness? Was that why he'd involved me in the first place? Had he talked to Kyle Craig about me? How much did he know? Everything? Or just more pieces of the puzzle?
Your continuing journey is interesting to me. I don't understand men like you. You want to know why terrible things happen. You want to make things right, if only occasionally. You've dealt with vicious killers before. Gary Sinigi, Jeffrey Schaefer, Kyle Craig, of course. Your country has produced so many killers, Bundy, Dahmer, all the others. I don't know why this happens in such a civilized country, a place with so many blessings.
I shook my head. I really didn't know either. But Lowe wanted to hear what I had to say on the subject. Had he asked Kyle the same questions?
I've always felt it has something to do with high expectations. Many Americans expect to be happy, expect to be loved. When we aren't, some of us go into a rage, especially if it happens to us as children. If instead of love we experience hatred and abuse. What I don't understand is why so many Americans abuse their children.
Lowe stared at me, and I could sense his eyes probing into mine. Was he a strange new kind of killer? A Lord Executioner? He seemed to have a conscience. He was philosophical. A philosopher warrior? How much did he know? Did the case end here? Why did someone orchestrate the murder of Ellis Cooper? I finally asked. Simple question. Will you answer it for me? He frowned.
All right. I will do that much. Cooper lied to you and your friend Sampson. He had no choice but to lie. Sergeant Cooper was in the An Lao Valley, although his records don't say so. I saw him execute a girl of 12. Slender, beautiful, innocent. He killed the girl after he had raped her. I have no reason to lie about that. Sergeant Cooper was a murderer and rapist. They all committed atrocities. They were all murderers. Cooper, Tate, Houston, Etra, Harris, Griffin, and Starkey too. The blind mice. They were among the worst, the most bloodthirsty. That's why I chose them to hunt down the others. Yes, I was the one, detective. But I'm already condemned to death here. There's nothing more you can do to me. Colonel Starkey was never told why the murders were taking place in the U.S. He didn't know my identity. He was an assassin, he never asked. He just wanted his money. I believe in rituals and symbolism, and I believe in revenge. The guilty have been punished, and the punishment fits the crimes. Our unburied dead have been revenged, and their souls can finally rest. Your soldiers left their calling cards, and so did I. I had plenty of time to think about it in here. Plenty of time to make my plans. I hungered for revenge, and I didn't want it to be simple or easy. As you Americans say, I wanted payback. I got it, detective. Now I am at peace.
Nothing was as it seemed. Ellis Cooper had lied from the start. He'd proclaimed his innocence to Sampson and me, but I believed Tran Van Lowe. The way he told the story was entirely convincing. He had witnessed atrocities in his country and maybe even committed them himself. What was the phrase Burns had used? Wreak havoc.
There was a saying the army had in the Anlau Valley. Do you want to hear it?
Yes. I need to understand as much as I can. It's what drives me.
The phrase was, if it moves, it's VC.
Not all our soldiers did that.
Not many, actually, but some. They came into villages in the outcountry. They would kill everyone they found. If it moves, they wanted to frighten the Viet Cong, and they did. They left calling cards, like the Straw Dolls detective, in village after village. They destroyed an entire country, a culture.
Lowe paused for a moment, possibly to let me think about what I had heard so far.
They liked to paint the faces and bodies of the dead. The favorite colors were red, white, and blue. They thought this was so humorous, too. They never buried the bodies, just left them for the loved ones to find. I found my family with their faces painted blue. Their ghost shadows have been haunting me since that day.
I had to stop him for a moment. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you go to the army when this was happening? He looked straight into my eyes.
I did, detective. I went to Owen Handler, my first CO. I told him what was happening in the An Lao. He already knew. His CO knew. They all knew. Several teams had gotten out of control, so he had the assassins sent in to clean up the mess.
And what about all the innocent victims here? What about the women Starkey and his crew murdered in order to set up Cooper and the others?
Ah, your army had a term for that. Collateral damage.
One more question, I said to Lowe, while everything he'd told me was boiling inside my head.
Ask. Then I want you to leave me alone. I don't want you to come back.
You didn't kill Colonel Handler, did you?
No. Why should I put him out of his misery? I wanted Colonel Handler to live with his cowardice and shame. Now go, we are finished.
Who killed Handler?
Who knows? Perhaps there is a fourth blind mouse.
I got up to leave, and the guards came into the cell. I could see that they were afraid of Lowe, and I wondered what he had done in his time here. He was a scary and complicated man, a ghost shadow. He had plotted several murders of revenge.
There's something else,
he finally said. Then he smiled. The smile was horrible, a grimace, no joy or mirth in it.
Kyle Craig says hello. The two of us talk. We even talk about you sometimes. Kyle says that you should stop us while you can. He says that you should put us both down.
Lowe laughed as he was led from the cell.
You should stop us, detective.
Be careful of Kyle, I said, offering some advice. He isn't anybody's friend.
Nor am I,
said Tran Van Lowe. Chapter 108. As soon as Lowe was taken away, Kyle Craig was brought into the interview room on death row in the isolation unit. I was waiting for him, with bells on.
I expected you'd stop by to visit, Alex,
he said as he was escorted inside by 3 armed guards.
You don't disappoint, never, ever.
Always one step ahead, isn't that right, Kyle? I asked. He laughed, but without a trace of mirth, as he looked around at the cell, the guards.
Apparently not. Not anymore.
Kyle sat across from me. He was so incredibly gaunt and seemed to have lost even more weight since I'd seen him last. I sensed that his mind was going a mile a minute inside that bony skull. "You were caught because you wanted to be caught," I said. "That's obvious."
Oh, Christ, spare me the psychobabble. If you've come as Dr. Cross, the psychologist, you can turn around and leave right now. You'll bore me to tears.
"I was talking as a homicide detective," I said.
Well, that's a little better, I suppose. I can stomach you as a sanctimonious cop. You're not much of a shrink, but then again, it's not much of a profession. Never did anything for me. I have my own philosophy. Kill them all, let God sort them out. Analyze that.
I didn't say anything. Kyle had always liked to hear himself talk. If he asked questions, he often wanted to ridicule whatever you said in response. He lived to bait and taunt. I doubted that anything had changed with him. Finally, he smiled.
Oh, Alex, you are the clever one, aren't you? Sometimes I have the terrifying thought that you're the one who's always a step ahead.
I didn't take my eyes away from his. "I don't think so, Kyle."
But you're persistent as an attack dog from hell, relentless. Isn't that right?
"I don't think about it much. If you say so, I probably am." His eyes narrowed.
Now you're being condescending. I don't like that.
Who cares what you like anymore?
Point taken. I must remember that.
I asked before if you can help me with Tran Van Lowe, the murders he's involved in. Have you changed your mind? I suspect there's still one murderer out there. Kyle shook his head. His eyes narrowed.
I'm not foot soldier. I'm not the one trying to help you. Some mysteries just never get solved. Don't you know that yet?
I shook my head. "You're right," I said. "I am relentless. I'm going to try to solve this one, too." Then Kyle slowly clapped his hands, making a hollow popping sound.
That's our boy. You're just perfect, Alex. What a fool you are. Go find your murderer.
Chapter 109. Sampson was recuperating on the Jersey Shore with Billy Houston, his own private nurse. I called him just about every day, but I didn't tell John what I'd heard about Sergeant Ellis Cooper and the others. I also called Jamila every day, sometimes a couple of times a day, or she'd call or email me. The distance separating us was becoming more and more of an issue. Neither of us had a good solution yet. Could I ever move the family to California? Could Jamila move to Washington? We needed to talk about it face to face, and pretty soon. After I returned from Colorado, I spent a couple of days working in Washington. I knew that I had one more important trip to make, but I needed some more preparation first. Measure twice, cut once. Nana had always preached that to me. I spent countless hours on Lexus, but also the military database, ACIRS, and the law enforcement system, RISS. I made a visit to the Pentagon and talked to a Colonel Pizer about violence against civilians committed by American soldiers in Southeast Asia. When I brought up the An Lao Valley, Pizer abruptly cut off the interview, and then he refused to see me again. In a strange way, that was a very good sign. I was close to something, wasn't I? I talked to a few friends who had served in Vietnam. The phrase, "if it moves, it's VC," was familiar to most of them. Those who knew about it justified it, since violent outrages were constantly being committed by the North Vietnamese. One Army vet told this story. He'd overheard other soldiers talk about a Vietnamese man in his mid-80s who'd been shot down. "Got to hand it to him," a gunnery sergeant had joked. "Man his age and he volunteers for the Viet Cong." And one name kept coming up whenever I talked about the An Lao Valley. In the records. Everywhere I looked. One name that was a link to so much that had happened, there and here. The fourth of the blind mice? I had to find that out now. Early on Thursday morning, I left for West Point. It would be about a 5-hour drive. I was in no particular hurry. The person I wanted to see there wasn't going anywhere. He didn't think he had any reason to run and hide. I loaded up the CD player with the blues mostly, but also the new Bob Dylan, which I wanted to hear at least once.